morning, students. Hope you all are staying safe at home. Today, we will be starting a new chapter of history, chapter 3, Rural Life and Society. As villages in ancient and medieval India, they were self sufficient. Mainly, the farmers they owned their land on which they cultivated, they paid taxes, which was known as land revenue, to the rulers, and they utilized the part of land revenue to improve the land, to implement welfare schemes for them, to make them available with the rest of the resources. So during years of crop failure, many of the rulers they exempted the farmers from paying taxes. They gave them the relaxation so as not to pay the tax, which ensured that there was always enough food for survival of the farmers and their families. So many of these systems they went under several changes with the coming of the British. The grant of Diwani allowed them to collect taxes, to collect the revenue from the prosperous regions. The right to civil and judicial administration remained with the Nawab, and this created a dual system of government where British they were not interested in utilizing the revenue for the welfare of Indians, as their aim was to expand or we can say their aim was to make profit, was to expand their operations, their trading operations in India, to maximize their ultimate profits. With this intention they introduced many of the changes in agriculture in India. Let us look at some of these. The British they introduced different forms of land revenue collection in different regions of the country, which helps them to maximize their profit. There were three main types of land revenue collection. The first one was permanent settlement. It was introduced by Lord Cornwallis in Bengal, Orissa, Varanasi, and some parts of Madras Presidency. Under this system, the zamindars, who in the Mughal period they were not having any ownership of the land, but only they were having the right to collect revenue from the peasants and farmers, they were made owners under permanent settlements. Owners of land they had to pay the British a permanent or we can say fixed amount of revenue and regardless of the yield. Okay, so here this amount they had to pay at a particular date. Failing this, if the farmers are unable to pay the tax or pay the revenue at the same time, they won't be allowed to continue their practice on the land if they are unable to pay the tax on time. Any tax which was collected above the fixed amount of the British, it belonged to the zamindar. This system was having some demerits, as the zamindars they began to charge inaccurate amounts of tax, as only a fixed amount was to pay to the British, and above that fixed amount everything belonged to the zamindars. So as to maximize the profits of zamindars, they started collecting more and more revenue from the farmers. Here the farmers, when they were not able to pay the tax, they borrowed money from the local money lenders at a very high rate of interest. When they were not able to repay the loan, they were forced to work on the land of the money lender as bonded laborers. So these were some of the demerits. We are moving on to the next system, that is the Ryotwari system. Here the British introduced a different method of revenue collection in Madras and Bombay Presidency in 1820, which was known as Ryotwari system. In this system, the Ryots, that means the cultivators, they were the owners of the land. They have to pay the half of their earnings as tax to the agents of the British government. And here Ryots or the cultivators, they were having more security because paying the taxes was another thing, but they were having the ownership of the land as well, which was a sense of security to the cultivators. As there were no intermediaries like zamindars, so the government they were not able to get more revenue, and because of that the farmers or the cultivators they were able to pay that revenue on time. The taxes they were revised every 20 years, after 20 years, and if the taxes were not paid, the ryot or we can say the land was being given to someone else for the cultivation. The next is the Mahalwari system. As this system of tax collection, it was introduced in Punjab and northwestern region of India in 1833. Under this system, one landlord Usually, they were the heads, they were chosen as the representative of a group of a village, and the village head they were used to collect the taxes from all the villages and hand it over to the tax collector. That tax collector from each village they collect the taxes in bulk and paid it to the government, and the cultivators they were individually and jointly responsible for the payment of taxes to the government. In this system too, the tax was fixed and they were revised at regular intervals. So there were some changes in agricultural policy under the British. As the revenue policy of the British, they destroyed the agriculture in many parts of India, especially in Bengal, Orissa and Bihar. And the policies, they resulted in the fragmentation of land holdings. Means it's like small pieces of lands were distributed to other persons, as the farmers they were not able to pay the revenue on time. So private ownership of land was there, absentee landlordism, operation of peasants, and commercialization of agriculture. So everything resulted to it was a disaster for the farmers. Now let us move on to the commercialization of Indian agriculture. The word commercialization, or we can say the word commercial, that means cash crops. They were grown with the motive to earn profit, to sell into the market and to earn the profit. As Britishers, they were having the sole motive of maximizing profit. They started exploiting the resources of the country. They began to force Indian farmers to grow commercial or cash crops like cotton, jute, and indigo, which were when we sell it into the market, they were having the more value as compared to the food crops. So Indian agriculture became commercialized. The Before this time, the peasants, the farmers, they cultivated for their self-sufficiency, for themselves, for their self-consumption, for the family, and a limited amount, a small amount was left for the sale. But here, now the commercialization, it brought a change where the crops now were grown as to the motive to sell and to earn profit. So the commercial crops they were used as raw materials in British industries, or they were sold as high profit in European markets. So the Indian farmers they here also didn't get enough or sufficient profit. They were just paid a small, or we can say a minimum amount for their yield, and the rest was kept as profit by the British government. Here, after some time, when the land was used to cultivate cash crops, in place of food crops, there was a severe shortage of food crops, severe shortage of food grains, which resulted to frequent famines, and millions of people died. So the British authorities they then too they continued their exploitative economic policies, and they didn't provide any relief, any relaxation to the poor farmers, which led to a number of peasant rebellions across the country in 19th century. One of the foremost rebellion here was Indigo Rebellion of 1859. Let us study about that. As the Indigo Rebellion, it was one of the major peasant uprising of the 19th century, which started in Nadia in Bengal. As indigo, it is a bright blue dye which is extracted from a plant which is mainly grown in India, and this dye was especially popular in European cloth manufacturers. As because of this, Britishers they started forcing farmers to grow indigo in place of food crops, and as indigo it could only be cultivated on fertile land, so the rest of the land it was reserved for the cultivation of rice. So on the place of rice, or we can say on the place of that land where rice should be grown, they started growing indigo. And as indigo it robbed all the it absorbed all the soil nutrients, and it left soil unfit for the cultivation of rice for several years. That means the land remained barren after that. And to promote the cultivation of indigo, the British planters they gave farmers loans at very high interest rate, and they started encouraging them to grow indigo. Rather, the farmers they earned little or no profit, as they were again unable to repay the loan, and because of that cycle they remained in perpetual debt, where just to pay the debt they have to take again a new loan, and then again they have to pay the interest, and all this cycle continued. After this operation or this continued exploitation by the British, Indigo planters, they finally led to the Indigo Rebellion in 1859, where peasants refused to cultivate indigo and they started attacking indigo factories and the houses of British planters with spears, bows and arrows. Many of the planters and zamindars, they were forced to flee, and finally British, they used police and army to suppress this revolt. An Indigo Commission was appointed in 1860, which studied the condition of peasants, and they studied everything, and they said that it would not be compulsory for the peasants or farmers to grow indigo, but indigo plantation, it continued in the parts of Bengal presidency, and plantations means it's like laborers then too, they were facing some or the other issues which continued even after that as well. So now let us learn about introduction of new technology in Indian agriculture. As agriculture, it flourished in pre-British India. Because of that, Indian farmers, they made use of many of the innovative devices and practices such as crop rotation, drill husbandry and Persian wheels. And because of that, when British, they took over, we can say, new modern system of farming in certain parts of Indian subcontinent, they tried to maximize their profit, not to improve the condition of the farmers. Let us study about Punjab. As we have read, in Punjab, it was a major place where 5 rivers met, and the soil here was ideally suitable for agriculture. So here there were the crops of superior quality of wheat, we can say, which was suited for baking. It is an occupation which was practiced in London, and in London it was having a greater demand, so as to complete we can say fulfill the demand of we can say wheat in London. Britishers started again forcing the farmers to grow more and more wheat here, and for that they improved the agricultural practices. They started teaching farmers new techniques, crop rotation, use of manure, control of crop diseases, so as to make farmers learn how to grow crops in a particular good way, we can say. Here they started using massive irrigation schemes as well, and they started constructing doab, they constructed canal systems, which was made the betterment of the farmers in Punjab. Here they also started building rail and road networks so as to facilitate transportation, as the farmers can reach to wider markets, domestic and international markets. And here the Britishers, they encourage farmers to grow more cash crops like cotton and sugarcane. As a result of all these measures, crop production in Punjab, it increased greatly, and Punjab, it prospered under British rule. So these were two contrasting case studies under Britishers about agriculture. So students, I hope that you have understood the chapter. Read the same from your textbooks, and if you have any doubt, feel free to ask. Till then, keep learning and have a good day ahead.